during this CVC, your two clans just spent their annual income.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to the HH Gaming podcast, brought to you by Hellhades.com. Once again, I'm joined by co-host of the show, Saphira, and today we are joined by a member of the community, which many of you will have heard of and know his work, HG Senti. Welcome to the podcast, dude.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be finally on the podcast.
He's getting his voice,
sound
guys.
like we've been delaying you.
He's commenting on every podcast saying, when am I going to get my say? It's like, you guys have got it wrong. I need to tell you the facts. So, Senti, for people in the community who maybe haven't heard of you, do you want to maybe give a little bit of a background about yourself, how you got into Raid, and I guess how you're known within the community?
Yeah, well, I guess I can start with my sort of origin story. So it seems to be the popular sort of first film of any franchise. Yep. So I think, like lots of people, I got into Raid during the first lockdown. So I got Raid about April 2020. So I recall there was a Skull Vargal fusion going on when I first joined Raid. So that probably dates.
That's terrifying because that's exactly the same amount of time that I've been playing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
same here.
Yeah, lockdown hitting the UK, lots of free time. We needed something to do. And yeah, there's obviously saw lots of the adverts for Raid. Seemed like quite a good sort of set of graphics for a mobile game. So I tried it out. As you know, this will be probably obvious when I sort of explain later, but I really enjoyed what seemed like quite a lot of min-maxing on the maths and the stats when I started playing. Sort of first thing I did was sort of read up, okay, how do you play this game properly? What's the optimal way to do things? And it seemed like a lot of numbers and optimizing. So I really got into the game. Also helped that day 2 I pulled Fushan. So that was my first legendary.
It's not bad.
Just casually day 2.
Yeah. And obviously the first thing you do when you pull a legendary is to Google Raid Fushan, how to play.
Ayumi Love.
Yeah, Ayumi Love. First video on Ayumi Love was Hellhades video on Fushan.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. But
we're boycotted by Ayumi Love these days.
Well, back in those days, yeah, he was on Ayumi Love. And first video, watched it. Oh, it's a British guy talking about Fushan. So watched the whole thing, realized he has way more videos, got into all his YouTube videos, eventually discovered there's a link to his Discord, joined his Discord, and I guess the rest is sort of history. So I've been in the sort of community and been a mod for HHs about over a year now.
Yep.
And I think probably how the community knows me is that sort of back in, and it's hard to imagine, so back in mid 2020,
it feels so long ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, a lot of this game was still essentially trial and error. People knew that the clan boss had a rotation to it, but there wasn't really a speed tune. People knew that you're supposed to stack crit damage as well as your main stat. There was sort of talk of this hidden multiplier variable behind every skill, and people complaining that I think champions like Neathwy Bloodwin had 1700 attack but hit like a wet noodle and couldn't understand how these end game players with their 7k attack Neathwys still couldn't kill anything in the arena. So
it was those olden days, wasn't it, when you had to basically run force keep over and over again to try and reverse engineer some weird multiplier that nobody even knew about.
Exactly.
Only the Russians could do it.
Yeah, only the Russians could do this. And we had this idea that there was a formula for defense, but not quite sure how big every defense value in the game was, and everything was a bit trial and error, and everyone just knew, right, build your champs 200 accuracy, 200 speed, good to go, 100% crit rate. And then I think once I really got to start knowing the game and how it worked, I think I realized that there's quite a lot of maths in the game, but the maths isn't as hard as I think some people are making out to be. So I think the one that I noticed quite early on was that building your champs is essentially, it's an optimization problem. There's like a budget that you can get through your gear, that there's only so many rolls you can have on each of your items. So essentially there's a limit to how many stats you can build onto your champs, and damage is calculated by attack times essentially 1 plus your crit damage. And that's for me at least, I looked at that, that's a standard, pretty standard quadratic optimization problem. So you just take
just
it.
Pretty standard. This one.
Yeah. I should say my background is that you know, I did maths at university all the way to a PhD. So maths is sort of where most of my background is.
You're a math god.
I was going to say, beats my 1+1. I'll get the crayons while you guys do the hard work. Yeah,
we're still on like A plus B equals X, and we're still like, you know, basic stuff.
So I think that's where it started. I think it was that. So I started posting on Discords, essentially, here's how you should really optimize your builds. You know, people have been massively underestimating impact of base attack on people's builds. I was talking about, you know, there's no point stacking 300% crit damage if you've got 3,000 attack on your Trunder. You should be sort of balancing it another way.
Sure.
And so that's really how I got into it. And then, you know, then we've had everything come out with speed tuning, with, you know, the data mining that's now revealed all of the multipliers. You know, we've done so much testing on the clan boss and all of the defense mechanics. And so I sort of now heavily involved with all of the sort of the, you know, the theory crafting and the understanding of how the game sort of works at a coding level. So that's one of the really interesting things if you ever sort of dive into the data mine, is that it's actually quite interesting to see exactly how a lot of the things in the game are coded, and you see where
interesting.
Yeah.
That's the polite term, right?
Yeah, you can definitely see where they've changed, you know, devs, and where things just don't make sense. I think the first time I sort of started, you know, ranting with Paul over what was in the game was when we looked at Tormund's passive. And I think by the time that we got the data mine, I think it was what version 34 of the passive.
Oh, something like that. It's like there's like a revision in the static essentially, and I think it's like the highest revision in all of the skill types. It's just insane. If they fix it, they break it. They fix it again, and then they've broken it again, and you're just in this constant cycle of, okay, well, we've done something else to it. Vogoth is the other one, right, that we've talked about, how every patch they seem to do something with Vogoth's passive. They've even done it in the last patch. They changed his passive again somehow. It's unbelievable.
It's one of these things, and you know, if you play high-end arena and you have Vogoth, it's really important whether Vogoth heals in between the hits of a multi-hit or heals after all the damage is done. You know, it's a difference from being able to one-shot, you know, Rotus to absolutely never being able to kill Rotus because he heals between each of your multi-hits. And there's absolutely no rhyme or reason when Vogoth does one or the other. It just seems to be like, oh, we've turned something on, we turned something off. We switched off this time. Oh no, it's broken this, so let's switch it back on.
Yeah.
So
there was a recent change they did to Rotus's passive, wasn't it? I remember it was a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, where essentially his passive would be different when there was a shield on this. So there was a way to basically, you know it better than I do when you explain it to me, but get around having a really low HP Rotus, but buffing with a big shield, which means that the shield was counted as part of the passive, and it was a bit stupid. And they changed that eventually.
So exactly. It was a thing that I think most top end players knew, that if you say had a 20,000 HP Rotus, but you put a 60,000 Krisk shield on him, he's got 80,000 effective health. And how the passive now works is that you have to hit him 40,000 to proc the passive, and also you can't hit him for more than 40,000 a hit. Previously, it didn't care about the shield. He had 20,000 health, so even though he had a 60k shield, if you did more than 10k, he'd go off. And so he was essentially impossible to kill if you had a shield on.
Sure.
And you could just build him with no HP, lots of attack and damage. And even like, you know, you could even get, if Kaimar got a sort of a, you know, sort of an unlucky sort of crit on him, and you then resisted the sleep, he'd pop off. So
and then he's gone. Extra turn.
Gone. And I'll get in on this topic about why Rotus just fundamentally breaks the arena. Well, Scythian Rotus, but it's there's just so much stuff that I think Plarium does, and I think Plarium doesn't realize that it's so subtle, some of the things that they can completely break the meta.
Yeah.
So the one I remember is a couple of months ago, they changed the shield breaker mastery so that champs that ignore shield no longer get the benefit from shield breaker, because it used to be that if the champion had a shield, even if you ignore the shield damage, you get the 25% damage.
Yeah.
So that made Yannicka essentially godly.
Yeah, I remember that.
There was a shield, and then they nerfed it and effectively took 25% off Yannicka's damage. And so overnight, suddenly, what became you could farm pretty strong shield mountain king teams, you're not one-shotting them anymore. And it was just utterly sort of, utterly devastating to a lot of teams running Yannicka. And it was just like, oh, they probably didn't even test it, probably didn't even realize it was just, oh, it shouldn't work like this, let's change it.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just make a tweak. And then as well as that, we'll put her in the game as a reward that you can collect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive point, I think. You're probably the first, I would say, ultra endgame player, as in someone who looks at a champion and instantly would go, that's a trash champion, or that's a really good champion, specifically for the endgame PvP. Most players will go, oh, well, it's only 25%. Whereas, when we talk and when you look at it, you're going 25% is the difference between it being viable or not viable at all. It is literally a 1 or 0, black or white. And I think that's the difference in the subtlety you're talking about. It's Plarium just go, it's only 25%. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're going, right, but that's fundamental. And if that fundamentally doesn't work, then the whole thing doesn't work. So you might as well just forget about the champion. And then you kind of, there's no middle ground.
Yeah.
I think when you're sort of squeezing every last bit of potential out of a character, that I guess that's where it makes the major impact, that's probably not being accounted for.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably, I can sort of segue that into the CVC that's just happened. So obviously with
rather nut scores, I hear.
Yeah. So obviously with the interest I've had in pushing to the end game. I have previously pushed Plat, although I haven't pushed Plat since Reaction because it is just way too toxic to be waking up.
RNG.
Yeah, 7 a.m. on a Monday just to have RNG screw you over. So you go into your first Monday morning thing in a grump because you've just got screwed over RNG. So I stopped pushing since Reaction. I've had 4 Plat finishes, and I sort of pretty near sort of doing everything there is to do in PvE, other than having a wonky Nightmare Hydra team, and I'll get onto that later. So I found myself now in pretty top end sort of clan in the Immortal Dawn, which is the original Mad clan. There's another one which is Immortal Elite, and this week I've just come out of a 50 million plays 48 million clan versus clan, which
I mean, if we were to put like a value on the amount of resources.
So Sentia has shared with me, they, obviously on clan versus clan, everyone, you get your summary. Yeah. In this screenshot here, it's essentially 422,685 gems.
Sorry,
one side.
Say that again.
So basically, you guys on Immortal Dawn have spent 422,685 gems versus, I'm guessing Revenge of Tentacles is the French clan, right?
No, Russian clan. They are the
Russian
clan. Yeah.
They did 315,000. So clearly they didn't whale hard enough to win the tournament. But yeah, so you think that those two clans alone combined is what, 735,000 or 40,000 gems in 2 days?
And if we were to put that into like a monetary value,
so 40 gems is essentially, if you were to just mass buy the $100 pack.
4200 is what, $100?
Yeah, 40 gems is about $100. So it's about $10,000 on one side and 80,000 on the other.
But $175,000, was it? $175,000? No, 17,000.
10K each.
So for some people in the world, during this CVC, your two clans just spent their annual income.
Yeah.
Oh, it gets worse than that. What was it you said? What did you send me the other day about some of your clan members they do during CVC?
Oh yes, I mean I'll talk about sort of CVC. This is the classic. So CVC is a classic example of where it becomes so mathsy, because when you're talking 50 million plays 48 million, you're basically talking ultra optimization. So you're literally talking about points, not just per minute, points per second.
Yeah.
Because if you want to get these high points, you essentially, for that 48-hour period, if you think about it, each clan is having to score 1 million an hour. And so if you're going to do 1 million an hour, you're going to have to optimize everything, which means at that level, and this is, again, I think none of this is really planned by Plarium when they first launched it, and they might have tweaked it with analytics, but I feel a lot of this is, again, random luck by Plarium.
Yeah, they just chuck numbers in, haven't they?
Yeah. Once you get to that stage, most endgame players will have a 15-second Spider 25 farm, which using the Sisia HP explode strat. So that's giving you 300 points every 15 seconds, and it's with loading times, you're probably doing about 1,000 points per minute. Faction Wars 21, which most people think is a really good thing that you're supposed to do at CVC, is 1,000 points. But as I said, Spider 25 is 1,000 points per minute. So if you don't have a minute,
not comparable.
Yeah, if you don't have a minute clear of a Faction War 21 boss, which a lot of people won't, and even top end players don't on some of the bosses, it's actually less efficient than doing Spider. So actually, either just don't do Faction Wars during those 2 days, or do Faction War 20, get out the way, and get back to doing Spider.
Yeah.
So, similarly,
So somebody in the clan notices that Senti's not in Spider, and he's trying to get his glyphs for the day, and it's just like, no, what are you doing? Get in there, get back to the Spider.
Stop slacking.
Exactly. It's like that's the thing, because people will see when your points stop increasing that what's going on. Either it's, and this is one hilarious thing, RSL Helper went down during the middle CVC because sent an update, and you could see just exactly how much the game now depends on RSL, just the panic that was going off. And
everyone's like, how do I click again?
Well, the irony of this is, obviously, when Hydra came out, they made a big thing of, we're going to move the Hydra update because you've told us in the past you don't want updates during clan versus clan. Yeah, well, that's great. And then they do two random, didn't seem like it was very important, because it wasn't like they were fixing a critical bug in the middle of CVC, which are both version updates, which require all your third-party engines to, or at least our, RSL Helper and our optimizer to be updated. And it was just...
Do you know what it reminds me of? And this is completely abstract to the raid scene, but I was watching a episode on Twitch of Parasocial the other day with Soda Poppin and people like that, and they were midway through one of these quizzes, and behind Soda Poppin, his door just opens and his maid comes in with the Hoover, and so I'm just picturing everyone's going hard on their CVC, and Raid just walks in the background with their Hoover, full blast. It's just like, don't worry, guys.
You can see the optimization, because on this grid of points distribution, effectively, I did send you a message earlier. I was like, who did the one Ice Golem run? Because it's basically 300 points on Immortal Dawn side in Ice Golem. So someone ran Ice Golem 25 by accident somewhere, either to do a clan quest or something of that nature.
They misclicked. They thought it was Spider. Turns out Ice Golem. I can't use the energy now. Exactly. I know, it's crazy. And the point is that it becomes so optimized that essentially everyone knows there's only a certain number of optimal ways to get points. So one of them is rolling gear to 16. So everyone will, prepare with all these plus 15 pieces and roll them to 16. The other one is, just pulling shards and then crunching your dupes, especially epics as books, and then just pulling more shards. So that's another classic way. The other way that is if you have, a fast 3v3, and especially if you're in gold 3, gold 4, you can get quite a lot of points,
basically.
But the problem is that it's not nearly as effective and efficient as people think, because after you do a couple of battles, you gain so many points, and then you're out of the section of the sort of the bracket where you're seeing one-man defenses.
Yeah, sure.
And so you can only do that for so far, and also it's quite tedious, and it's incredibly sort of dependent on you finding these one-man teams and also having a good sort of farm of those teams. So a lot of people just go back to Spider 20, Spider 25.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last...
There is a handshake, though, I would imagine to happen, is because obviously gold 3, gold 4 is the players in your clan and tentacles and other stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's just kind of agreeing to put one-man defenses in. So it's kind of like, this ultra competitive 3v3 is basically a CVC farm session for 2 days, because everyone puts one-man defenses in, because there's this common and an official agreement that if you put a defense, I'll put a defense, and we can farm each other for 3 points.
Unless you're trying to be incredibly cheeky and you find their biggest whale and just deliberately lose to them and boost them so they never see one man for teams. That is
elite min-maxing at its best.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
So essentially the strategy just becomes, for 47 of your hours, you're doing Spider and burning through as much energy as possible. You're pulling shards and you're doing 3v3 when you want to. And then in the last hour, it all comes down to books. And that's essentially how CVC has, I would say, degenerated to that sort of level of gameplay. I mean, it's not probably a problem for Raid. I think player probably look at this and think this is great. People are burning their energy. They're engaging with the core content, which is now raiding Spider, which I think only happened when they changed the points balance. And
I mean, it's better than burning mystery shards, though, isn't it?
Exactly. And they still get what they want at the end, which I think CVC was introduced ultimately to get whales to actually burn their resources that they are stacking, and try and snipe each other with books at the end. And the really scary thing is that people probably think, oh my god, what a waste of money, whales burning all this money. The scary thing is that this is actually what a lot of them want, because most weeks, most of the whales actually told not to go hard on CVC, actually told not to play. So it used to be that the problem with CVC was that you saved everything for CVC, so you didn't play for 2 weeks until CVC came along, and then you went massively hard.
Yep.
The problem now is that, as sort of Paul was describing, for this gaming of the system, because the matchmaking is completely known, you match up with a clan that scored similar points to you. And I know why players have the system. They think this will give you, really competitive,
even chances.
Yeah,
chances. And it might work for tier 1s to tier 5, but tier 6, essentially the top milestone is about 5.4 million, which works out at less than 200k per.
It's 180, I think.
Yeah, 180. Any end game player with resources is easily going to smash 180. So essentially, the milestone's a joke. So all the end game clans are essentially using their resources to deliberately finish in a certain place to match up against a clan that they know they can beat.
Yeah.
So the entire purpose of CVC, unless you're going hard against another top end clan, is to make sure that you finish next to a good, but essentially a second sort of rank whale clan. So that means a lot of their biggest whales are told you can't spend, because we're trying to fine tune here within 10,000 points. And so you're not allowed to go and book your sort of all those champions you've been saving up, because that's going to be 100,000 straight like that. So what's happened here is that, although I think players want to get everyone to use their resources, what happens is that clans go for weeks without doing that. Eventually they get bored and go, right, let's have a fight this week. So let's finish near a top end clan, and let's then go absolutely ham, burn our resources, and then go back to sort of find someone
sitting there with the resources.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I think the problem is the way that they've structured the sort of milestone rewards for the artifacts. Like, you've spent 50 million points there. You've got exactly the same rewards as the person that beat our clan this week by like 100,000, who did I think 6.8.
Yeah.
And to actually get the third milestone, the gap differential needs to be so substantial that the concept of, well, we'll match you up with an even person, well, means you're basically saying you're never getting milestone 3 and 4. And for me personally, I rage at this, because they always put reaction as 1 and 2. Like pretty much the last 3 months, it's been reaction 1 or 2. So to get a blood shield item, you have to fix the system. But again, and they just always like sitting there thinking players aren't going to fix the system to get what they want. Blood shield is, like, for a lot of people don't realize, probably the difference between you running a 1 minute speed farm in Fire Night versus a 2 minute speed farm in Fire Night.
Yep.
Blood shield is the answer for a lot of things.
And this is the problem, is that, again, players that get those milestones 3 and 4, they don't get it through competition. And this again is the problem with having sort of the year of PvP. They get there through negotiation. And this isn't a problem just with Raid, it's a problem with PvP games the world over. If you played any games like Clash or games of the ilk of Kings of Avalon or Guns of Glory, anything like that, what always happens is that the top whale clans will just negotiate.
Yeah, we used to do win trading in World of Warcraft in rated battlegrounds.
And that's
you would basically pick one person per week to become High Warlord, and everyone would understand that they would be the person to be getting it that week.
Yeah. And the idea is that, if you're, say, a clan like ours that can do 50 million, and then 1 week, you deliberately undercook it, do 7 million and match it against a clan where 7 million is literally their limit, you can essentially start with them and say, listen, there's absolutely no way
you're going to beat us.
You're going to beat us. And if we wanted to, we could bury you 4-0. how about
it means the other clan stops because they're not going to waste resources.
It's just like, how about you just go to 5.4 million, stop there, and we'll make it easy for you, and we'll just agree a 3-0, 4-0, and that's sort of how a lot of CVC goes. It's that if clans want the third or fourth accessories, they will negotiate at the start and essentially save the pain. Usually when you see a matchup like this, it means that somewhere down the line...
I was going to say, so what happened this week?
Well, I think there was it was covered in a video. So the Russian clan took in the alleged cheat engine user, and
Who did he?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a personal vendetta there, and also I think both sides being top end clans, neither side were, you know,
we're not backing down.
Yeah, we're not backing down.
Because you do find a few of them, right, who are basically just like, you know, yes, there's an agreed rule that we do this, but actually that's not what we want to do. We're just going to go ham on every single CVC, whether you want to or not. I think there are a few of those clans still in there that are just like not optimally doing it. They're just doing it because they want to, I don't know, show off or something.
And I think honestly, the reason why this happens is that the top tier is sort of too big, and like this is going to go into sort of my sort of kind of reflections on this. The issue is that, you know, once you get to tier 6, everyone pretty much gets the same rewards. Yes, Plarium has this sort of personal rewards to encourage clans to win, but clans at that end want to win anyway because, you know, they want to win, they're competitive. But the problem simply is that because it's tier 6 is too large, it's too easy to find someone that you know you can beat. So the problem is that it's like if Platinum, instead of being 300, was sort of, you know, 30,000, you could just go into Plat, avoid all the difficult people, and just keep hitting the, you know, those that you can beat. And this is sort of why I think CVC is slightly broken as a PvP concept, because it's more negotiation most of the time, and it's definitely why 3v3 doesn't work. So 3v3 is another example, as I think Paul's mentioned, where people just win trade. And if you care about 3v3, you're in gold 4, and you're doing that because, you know, you want maximum points for CVC. But honestly, I've been in sort of gold sort of 3v3 since it launched. I know I've got there and never fallen out. And I will actually say, I know people are complaining like, you know, arena's getting harder. I'll actually say that gold 2, gold 3, 3v3 tag team arena has actually gotten easier in the last couple of months, and it's getting progressively easier. I'm finding it much easier now to just either stay in gold 3 or promote myself into gold 4, where, you know, it becomes quite try hard. But the only way I can explain it is that even though gold tag team arena is only 8,750 players, it's still not that many players move in and out with the relegation system from silver 4 to gold 1. And so the players that sort of are in there kind of, you know, life is great. We get full access to all of that the Bazaar can offer.
Sure.
But there aren't 8,750 really try hard 3v3 players. So a lot of people are in there, put no effort into their 3v3 teams, except just enough to stay in gold. And there's not that competition that sort of drives and improves and power creeps the teams in there. So I'm finding it's now much easier to beat teams in there. And I think, ironically, if you think about how 3v3 works during the week, there are two types of players, basically. There's the players that put in the one-man defenses, and there's players who can't be bothered, don't put them in because they can't be bothered to climb Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Because, you know, if you put those one-man defenses in, you are going to fall down. You're eventually going to have to fight your way up through proper teams to stay ranked.
I woke up with 286 points this morning because I had a one-man in for CVC. I'm in silver 4. And I like on that point, I think a lot of it is a case of gold 1, 2, 3. You've got players who probably care a little bit more. And then the rest of it is people who just like do it for the advanced mission and they end up somewhere in silver 2, silver 3, silver 4. Can't really be bothered. Maybe they've done the advanced mission, like I've done the advanced mission. I'm not really that obsessed with being in gold.
I was going to say
it's easier, right? Because
I think a lot of people fall into that category. Where they'll just basically go up, get the achievement, and then, you know,
fall back.
And just sit in a happy zone.
Yeah, and the reason gold 3 has actually got easier is, if I think about it, where are the really, really sort of try-hards in gold and 3v3? They are in Gold 4, near the top end, they enjoy 3v3. You know, you have people who do enjoy the sort of the chess battle that is 3v3 because they have 12 maxed out champs with all the gear. And then there are the people at the low end of Gold 1 who are fighting desperately not to fall into Silver 4 and lose access to Gold Tier Bazaar. So everyone in between is essentially people that kind of casual who want to win trade, but still, you know,
care a little bit
to get back up. And if they don't feel they've got good enough teams, they don't ever put one-man defenses in, so they never fall down.
Yeah.
You know, what they can do is on Mondays and Tuesdays, even if you have a four-man full defense, you'll still see people with one-man defenses, and you still be able to get a few. You know, you still be getting your 10
on reset day,
and you still be get your some of your gold bars. So what happens is the people who put in the one-man defenses need to actually have the better teams, because when you fall down to 200 points, who are you fighting on the way up? Because again, player matches you with people with the same score, so you're not facing those.
They do the range, don't they? Like
they do the range.
3 are kind of like below you by about 10%. Then you've got another 4 that are about the same, and then you've got some ones you can always go, well, I'll gain like an extra 12 because they're maybe 300 points above you. So they always range it in that sense.
Exactly. And so you end up fighting other people who put one-man defenses in, who also think they're quite good at 3v3 or good enough to climb up. And so actually, if you think about the people who lose out and get relegated and lose out from Gold 1, they tend to sometimes be the better players, the players who actually risked putting on one-man defense and then, you know, didn't climb enough. And so you end up attritioning from Gold, not the serious players, but not the sort of the players that maybe should be leaving Gold, but some of the serious players. So actually what I'm finding is that Gold's getting easier. But what's quite scary for me is that it shouldn't be easier if there's like a mass of players trying to get into Gold from Silver 4 and it's super competitive. So what that suggests to me is actually the super competitive end of Raid is fewer than the size of Gold 3v3, which is 8,750 players. Which, if you think about it, is a little worrying for a game the size of Raid, that actually it's a few thousand people who really care about competitive CVC, and they're talking about a year of PvP. Because
I mean, we talked about in the last podcast that we just don't think that there's the player base for that size at the moment anyway, because there's too many barriers to entry.
And that's actually the biggest topic that probably we've talked about over the last couple of weeks on direct messaging and stuff is they've driven the game since Hydra really more and more towards like, if you've got XYZ, great, you can do everything. If you haven't got XYZ, you might as well just not even bother.
Yep.
Because it's just too much. You lose too much. You haven't got a replacement that you can use.
Exactly. And this what utterly irritates me about how they set it up. And I can see how it's great business, but every single meta PvE champ happens to also be pretty meta in PvP. I might be sort of overgeneralizing, but especially for Hydra, like
you're right.
The meta Hydra team now, like the two champions that you need absolutely right now to do a wonky nightmare on Hydra are Duchess and Krisk. Krisk has kind of fallen out the meta, but he was always meta pretty much everywhere else, and Duchess is, you know, the defense meta.
If you haven't got a Duchess, and my line is, if you haven't got Duchess, you might as well not bother thinking about Gold 3v3, because every single one of them, you look at pretty much, I would imagine, like you probably could get in, but not having a Duchess-driven defense for Gold, or trying to get into Gold at least, is extremely hard, because you're fighting against teams, and literally every single defense is going to have a Duchess. So it almost feels like, you know, if I pick 9 teams out of my 10 on my list, at least 9 of those are going to have a Duchess in one of the teams, because of how dominant she is on defense.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of just a thing of it's more just that Plat, like every defense seems to revolve around, you need Duchess as passive. Like to survive.
Duchess with a Suga or something of that nature, something to drain damage out of them at one hit, essentially, to keep your team alive.
And now we're seeing, you know, the meta strategy to get fast, wonky, normal and hard Hydra is Trunda, her A2. And so yet again, the most broken champion for DPS in PvP becomes the champ that you need to do fast Hydra keys. So what it's doing, it's like it's whittling down the pool of champions that people actually need to have a proper endgame account to fewer than 10. And it's sort of made it even more irritating with sort of champion empowerment, because essentially it's made it to the point where you might as well, if you really care about endgame PvP, you might as well go and find some of these sort of, account trading sites, because you're looking for such a small, pool of champions. It's going to be so expensive, especially because they keep diluting the pool.
Yeah.
And they keep diluting the pool with champions who you can just look at their kits and they're useless for me.
Jim Wong.
Yeah. But it's not even that. It's that Plarium doesn't seem to understand that at the end game, how you design a champion that's relevant to end game. It's not hard. I mean, for a DPS, Magnar became pretty useful for a lot of end game players because he hit as hard as a Trunder without attack up on, because they accidentally forgot that, again, if you hit twice, you don't want the condition that stops them hitting twice. But they just will not seem to release champion DPSs with hits near Trunder.
What I notice as a trend is conditional based extra hits. It's almost like they assume you're not going to get the extra hit, so they make the first hit hard enough to make the first hit reasonable. So, like, for example, Jin Wong is a good example. You might see that at A3 and go, oh, it hits twice like Magnar, so it's going to hit as hard as Magnar. It's like, well, no, because they know you're always going to get the second hit. They've coded the damage to be as if both hits are one hit. But with things like Trunder, with things like Magnar and Vasulf, they go, well, you might not have the condition, so you probably need the first hit to be as strong as the second hit. And then with Magnar, it's like, well, it's really easy to guarantee the second hit. The condition is almost, you just don't bring HP burn. So easy. And now all of a sudden you've got a nuclear that's doing almost double the damage of anyone else in the sort of, if you think of how you would balance it on a linear line, you'd have all of them in kind of a near enough thing, legendary slightly higher, rare slightly lower. All of a sudden this guy's double because, oh, well, you're hitting twice the same value. And that's why Trend has always been so broken. The A2, we know, goes through the crit damage multiplier twice, which is why it's now broken on Hydra, because you're getting 400% per head, not 200% per head, because it's getting twice the benefit. So easy to code that out, but they haven't done. And the A3, obviously, they were like, oh, well, of course you wanted to stun. Not. Of course you do.
Yeah.
It's and that Trunder sort of mechanic is exactly why it just irritates me when I look at new champ designs, because essentially we are in the meta where the debuff is dead. Like you can sort of see in sort of top end platinum, top end arena, champions like Madame have disappeared because essentially their role was just debuff.
I think I said this about a month ago, and everyone was like, oh, I don't know who I said it to. They were like, oh, I was like, I don't think Madame is that important anymore. And they're like, what do you mean? She's like huge. Like, yeah, but she's not, because it's not about like the speed meta. She was king in speed meta because there was nothing you could do to essentially stop her from taking away your only defensive mechanic. But now we've got stone skin and reaction and protection and like.
But yeah, and
it's not matter.
It's not even that. It's that debuffs are important in PvE content, but the problem is when they're making the godly PvP champs godly in PvE, you might as well just use your well-built PvE. Your well-built PvE.
Build them for PvP.
For PvE.
And use them in PvE. Yeah.
The classic example is you build your Arbiter to be your speed lead in PvP. She goes into the High Elves faction war and just absolutely carries your team. And that's fundamentally the problem with the game design that Raid has, is that it's that the PvE should be a separate pool of champions. And some champions do that, but there are just too many strong PvP champions that go in and wreck house. And it's the debuffer that's really, I think, absolutely suffered. So to the point where when I see a new champion released, at the end game, what you're thinking about is look at everything that it does. If it applies a debuff, just ignore it. And think about how good that champion is now. And that's the problem with so many of the champs, is that if you take away the debuffs, they are just useless. And that sort of that top end play, that's what the champion is. You're not going to use any of those debuffs, because it's not even, you need accuracy to land the debuff. So if you're a DPSer, you're not building any accuracy anyway, because you're building it to hit. But even if you try to build them hybrid, or even if you try to build them full accuracy, you've got so many champs now that do AoE block debuffs. So if you lose speed race, you sort of get them cleansed. You've got cleansers. You've got the fact that if swift parry or reaction procs, you have to go second time anyway, at which point their team is doing the stuff to get rid of your debuffs. So you basically need Kaimar to reset your big ability to get the debuffs back.
You've got Stone Skin now, which obviously blocks any debuffs, and it can be protected 50% if you get to your full 6.
Exactly. That previously with the immunity meta, the debuff was only good like Madame if there was a strip before the debuff. But and and Paul's heard me rant about this, but then the most overpowered, broken mastery in the game, Resurgent. This is another thing where they changed, and I'm sure no one knew they changed it. It used to be that at least if you hit something, Resurgent couldn't cleanse the debuff that you were placing
It's so dumb.
on your hit. They've changed something that now Resurgent can cleanse on the same hit the debuff you're trying to put.
Yeah. And it's not even double hit. So it's not even like the mechanic hits twice, and therefore the second hit cleansed the first hit debuff. It's, I've hit you for 100k damage or 10k damage. I've placed a debuff, and because I've procced your Resurgent, which is obviously 25% of your health, I'm now going to take that debuff that you've literally just placed. And it's like, wow. It is. And it's not that hard to proc because it's such a high percentage. It's a bit like Retribution, right?
Yeah.
You know, the different people think that the second mastery, was it the one next to it, where it's like if someone places a CC, it's 20%.
Yeah.
The difference between Retribution in Clan Boss versus that other one is substantial. I think Retribution, you can expect probably almost like 4 times as much out of it, because it's every hit 50%, where this one is like 20% on a stun.
Yeah.
And the difference is massive. That deterrence is the word I was thinking of.
Yeah.
You know, obviously it's been big in Hydra. Deterrence works great in like sort of like an anti-blender kind of, or like a reverse blender kind of scenario. But the difference with Resurgent is what, 50% if you lose 20%?
Yeah, 50% if you lose 25% health.
It's
and
gonna happen a lot.
if it's a double hitter, it can proc multiple times. There's no cooldown on it. So, you know, if you hit twice, you can cleanse 2 debuffs. So you can cleanse, and you know, I've heard Sophia complain about how Riho places 6 debuffs, and she's been in situations she places 6 debuffs, and of course Resurgent cleanses the stun. At which
The
point,
one that you need.
the one that you need.
Yeah, the one that you were going for.
The one you
Just
need,
like
1 in
we
6
won't
chance.
but-
And then that's the cleanser, cleanses everything else, and you know,
That's gone.
it's gone. You might as well not have bothered with the debuffs, and that's the problem with debuffs. And as long as the debuff is dead, the bomb meta is dead, because the bomb meta is essentially a debuff meta. And so the fact that you can cleanse, you know, even Astrolith, which you can't resist,
You can still cleanse it.
you can still cleanse it. And of course, you're going to build her masses of attack because you want bomb damage.
It's just useless after the bomb's gone, because she ain't going to do anything, because you don't want crit rate, because, well, the bomb doesn't do any crit damage. So it's no point. It's a wasted stat.
Yeah. And the only way they can overcome this, they're starting to realize, oh, we need to have more irresistible sort of, you know, mechanics,
Yes.
but then they put it behind conditionals against specific factions, which are just, you know, again,
Bonkers.
The logic of those abilities, just...
It's similar to what you were saying about debuffs for me. If I ever see anything that says this works against this specific faction, I forget that it does that.
Yeah, you might as well ignore it.
Because like the Halsring is a great example, I think, or was it? No, Danag. Danag basically has Bane of the Elves is A2, and it's against High Elves and Dark Elves. And he's designed pretty much as like an arena style nuker. If that's whether or not, you know, we know he's not, but that's what they've built him. Like if you read his kit, you would think, right, I'm going to put him in the arena. When you actually look at the meta at the top end and you start looking at the champions that would actually apply, you're not seeing your Arbiter teams because you're not seeing speed meta. So you're looking at it and going, well, it's probably maybe Lydia, Blind Seer, probably Mithrala potentially when she comes out. And then it's like, if you have the odd Ceres maybe, and then it's no more champions. So you're basically saying this ability that has an irresistible effect or something works on 4 champions.
Yeah. But even then, you know, I'd rather kill the Arbiter than have some sort of conditional random sort of debuff put on. And that's always the problem with the debuff meta, is that it's that Trundle A3 again. Given a choice of doing that massive 100k hit a second time or stunning the target, I'm taking the massive 100 hit.
Absolutely.
And
especially in the speed meta, where it's kind of like, if you're not going to go first in the speed meta and you're against a speed person, you probably lost anyway.
Yeah.
So all the other effects of whether or not you do, you know, it's basically, do you go first and do you do enough damage to kill the enemy team? If you don't go first, you lose. If you don't do enough damage, you lose. There's no middle ground. Otherwise, you just might as well go a different strategy altogether.
Yeah. So you've got to have a way of making things uncleansable. I think that's the main thing. If it's uncleansable, then yes, we can finally beat this silly Resurgent meta. And the other thing that has completely broken the debuff meta is Siphi Rotus. And as long as the Siphi Rotus passive exists, you will never see a truly dominant bomb meta, because Rotus has this passive with Siphi, which is that before he takes a turn, every debuff just disappears.
Everything.
Auto cleanse.
No cooldown.
And it's almost like Plarium forgets that this is in the game. So when you see all of these like amazing sort of like, champions been designed in kits, and then just look at it, it's like, okay, this has been designed as a PvP champion.
Yeah.
You do remember that the PvP, there is a mechanic where I can just cleanse every debuff.
Right. Yeah. Unless they make protected debuffs a thing, which they started doing with buffs. We've had them a few times where they can't be removed, but now we're actually starting to see like a protection set. Unless we get protected debuffs, I think, as you say, like you could release another 100 champions with another 100 different debuffs. It's not going to make a difference because my Sifri Rotus just cleansed everything. And then once those two get going, what are you going to do? Like Rotus has so many extra turns. There was a period of time when they nerfed him that he went out of meta, but that was before reaction and everything. Now it's a case of, well, you can make him survive. And once he gets going, he has that same effect where he will one-tap someone with his A3. He will, start building up a lot of max HP. He will eventually start getting to, it might take a bit longer, but he's still going to kill everyone. Yeah. Probably better than most of the nukers.
And the only way I can see this being changed, and I don't know if they want to change it, because again, the Plarium has done very well with the fact that the meta has been so stale and so dead, because it means they know they've got marquee champions that people want.
10 times.
They know that, this is a thing that they don't need to power creep the game, because the danger is if they keep releasing champs which are more powerful than the previous to make people want to pull shards, is that you eventually power creep the game because you eventually keep having to produce more and more powerful champions for people to want them. So they know they've got these marquee champions that everyone wants, but the problem that happens is then there's only that one champion that does that. Only Hellhades changes the meta, so you have to think about what happens, at the start of the round in the arena when Hegemon goes. So that only Kaimar has the full,
full cleanse,
full sort of reset, so that you can have 3 AoEs. You've got your AoE reset, another AoE, and then the second AoE in a champ. And in the current meta, that's what you need. You need 3 AoE.
Warlord, another example, the only champion that can fully put skills on cooldown.
Yeah.
And do it so that probably he gets it back before he needs to do it again.
And I don't know if they're just scared of releasing champions with 2 similar kits, but because Duchess's kit is so unique, it'd be really nice if one day they would release a new champion that was like Duchess, so you didn't need Duchess to do everything you need in Hydra.
Or the good example is Tatura, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh, well, we only need a perfect veil. Before Tatura came out, it was like, well, the only other champion that was even close to the power of Duchess was Rector. And even then, the perfect veil was conditional on full HP. And so it's like, oh, great, we've got a perfect veil champion. It's like, yeah, but you lose the continuous heal, you lose the revive, you lose the passive.
Basically everything.
Yeah. So it's kind of like he's not really a replacement. Yeah, you get the perfect veil, and yes, he does damage, but to almost go Plarium have released an alternative to Duchess is kind of like saying, well, we buffed King Garog, so now he does as much damage as Ethos, so he can compete with Trunder. Well, he does as much damage, but you're still not using him because he loses. There's still too much, not enough there. You lose the revive alone is too big a loss.
My example is Kaimar. Kaimar is, even if you take out his reset ability, he still has a pretty bonkers move on his A2, which is that full
cleanse and sleep.
Full cleanse and sleep.
Yep.
So you can probably release another champion with Kaimar's A3 with that full sort of, skill reset, and still have Kaimar as a desirable champ. But at least then you have some other alternative for players looking for a reset champ for their seer comps, or going into sort of the reaction meta looking for a reset. And you could do it with, you can make it worse than Kaimar, so he doesn't have a speed lead in arenas, which is another another bonkers than Kaimar. But you could have it as they give an attack up buff, which is one thing that Kaimar doesn't have, and which you lose, is you lose the attack up. Or you could, put something else in his kit that makes it better for seer comps. So maybe have him as this champ as a full reset, but gives you 2 AoE buffs.
Right. Or his A1 isn't an AoE. Because that's the thing with Kaimar. You can build in basically stun set with high accuracy, and then he's good in arena, he's good in your PvE teams. Like if you want to do Doom Tower, if you don't have a Kaimar, you're basically adding another 5 hours onto your game time a month, because the Kaimar Seer or the Kaimar Zarvia is such a dominant team because of everything he's got. And I also look at it as another example with Umbral in this current rotation. Everyone is using Umbral and Hydra because it is the best block buffs ability for what it does. There isn't Ugo. negative affinity or different issues. Also, like it's just a long cooldown. You've also, I think Kimmy's the closest one, but she has to remove a buff.
Yeah.
So you kind of like thinking, well, why is this epic the only epic that can reliably place block buffs all the time versus all the other champions in the game? And it's the same thing, right? It's just too much, I suppose, too much power on one champion.
Yeah, because like it's the evolution of the complaint players have had that there are only 3 AoE counterattackers in the game.
Right.
That was the previous issue. Yeah, that was the previous issue. But I'd say that's a minor issue compared to the fact there is only one of everything we've described.
Yeah.
And I like, you know, I take 3 champions with a full reset ability like Kaimar. You know, I actually take where you know, we are with AoE counterattack for some of these abilities I'm describing. You know, Kaimar's ability, the Sifi Rotus passive. I'd love to have another sort of guaranteed cleanse sort of on a passive, which is what Jingwon should have been. Jingwon should have been essentially every turn he does a full cleanse of any CCs. That's what would have made him then avoid legendary, because there are other void legendaries that do something like that.
And like the other suggestion I had, I was talking to someone in our Discord channel on his A2. Like his A2 at the moment is a 2 random debuff for 1 turn on a 2-turn cooldown. And then you go, okay, well, after about 4 months or was like 4 rotations of doing Doom Tower normal, I get Dark Hail. And Dark Hail does a full AoE 1 turn, all debuffs extension. It's like, right, so my Void Legendary does 2 random debuffs for 1 turn, but my Epic that I get for free does it better. So why don't you just make that? Like, if you still want it to be a single target, that's fine. Make it do all debuffs for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown. So that guy, you can basically keep debuffs on 1 target on all the time. It's a Void Legendary. Why are they so afraid of making something so strong? A similar example was Sigmund. Sigmund's passive, what was it, like 20% chance to reduce the duration? And then you got champions like in the same faction, a rare champion that does it, Vanguard, I think it was, on a passive, no cooldown, full, like just reduces it. It's almost like you guys aren't looking at this and going, you know, I understand you're trying not to make it powerful, but by making it weaker, you're essentially making them pointless.
Yeah. And there's 2 explanations I have for that. One is that it's a deliberate attempt to dilute the pool so that, you know, you can generate more money with people trying to chase these marquee champs and you want to avoid power creep.
Yeah.
Or it's the fact that they are literally testing these champs at a very low level.
Yeah.
Make
sure they're not broken so we can buff them later.
There's 2 ways, isn't it? Right. They're either designing them with the concept of, well, you know, we haven't got a champion in this faction that can do decreased accuracy, so we'll make one. That'll do.
Yeah.
Or the other way I look at it sometimes is like Lady Quinnen for me is a good example of this idea where they put something in and then they want it to with something else and they realize, oh, actually, if we put both of them in, it's a little bit too powerful. So they then kind of water down both effects to the point where, because they're doing 2 things, they're now not doing either of them good enough to warrant their place. So Lady Quinnen hits really hard on her A2, but the AoE doesn't hit hard because it also doesn't increase attack. So it's like, well, we can't have a champion that does both. That's just too powerful. So
I wonder if it's even worse. I wonder if they just test it on champions without mastery. So I swear Plarium think, oh, champions that don't hit but do debuffs are actually worse than champions that hit and place a debuff, because, you know, you're getting a hit, you're getting damage.
Yeah.
Everyone who plays the game knows that if you are debuffer, the best debuffers are the ones that don't hit. Because they can't weak hit, they can't proc Resurgent, they can't proc any other silly mastery that will wreck up what, when you're on offense, has to be an incredibly well-tuned, well-oiled machine that gives you near perfect 100% win rate. And anything that hits will wreck that. So you'll find that essentially, you know, you've got everyone uses champs that generally don't really hit on their debuffs. Like these hybrid champs.
Ceres, great example.
Ceres, and, you know, the prop Ceres, and I think that's the thing that hurt Romantu. People are saying, like, the thing that hurts Romantu is that his big move where he places the block passive skills, the multiplier is too large. So you're getting the situation again where you want to place
it too hard.
Hits too hard. You want to place on that Asuga and you want to place it on that Duchess, but you've got, you know, 2 great maxed out a Great Hall, you've got everything set up, and he's gone and smacked them, and he's like, the Resurgent has cleansed the one thing that his job was to do, which was to place that debuff. And so Romantu, even though, you know, great champ, has a unique skill, if he just stripped and placed rather than strip, hit and place, it'd be so much better.
It's also like things like Scion or Sion or whatever you say. There's a great example like of a champion that literally makes absolutely zero sense is his A3 ability. He attacks, then he buffs himself. It's like, what's the point in that? Like, if I want to like attack something, then I want the damage buff to happen before I attack it. Otherwise, it's not like he's doing anything other than doing damage. So that clearly that skill is meant to hit and do some damage, but I get the buff afterwards. So it means you have to bring someone else to make him viable, which immediately makes him not so good. Noble's a great example. We were having a discussion about whether or not Noble or Jinwon was the worst legendary in the game. That was our debate this week. And my point of view is he's actually not as bad as the reputation he gets, because it's framed in my head. It's like, well, I've got Salad. So if I pull him and I use him with Mashaled, all of a sudden his kit comes online because you've got someone to give him the requirements to make his kit work. And then he's actually quite strong because the turn meter control that he gets is decent. But without Mashaled, he's the worst legendary in the game. So it's kind of like they've made a champion design require something so much, but then have watered it down so that it's not as consistent because they fear he might be too strong. I don't know. It's very difficult to know the way they approach it.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, and especially that we get from the reception across the board when we start telling people about these new champions coming out and why we maybe put a downer on them, is, you know, people turn around to us and they say, oh, well, it's great for a starter account. It's great for a mid-game account. But I guess what they're not quite understanding is the argument that you guys have been saying here was, yes, they may be okay for your account now, but the impact on the game as a whole by watering down the chance of you getting these champions who are actually going to take you to endgame is massive. So, you know, when we look at these champions and they're coming out and they're releasing like new fusions, it's like, well, you know, that's pretty meh, you know, and people are sort of jumping in the comments saying, oh yeah, well, you know, it's good. It may only be rubbish if you're an ultra in-game player, but actually that impacts everybody. It doesn't just impact, you know, the new players who are going to get a benefit from this champion. They could be getting so much better. And actually by getting that champion, it reduces the chance that they're going to get those good champions down the line.
Yeah, it's also, I think the problem is that it's making such a gulf between these marquee champions and your average champion that it just increases the temptation for people to go find a starter account on these sort of, you know, dodgy
and buy it. It's cheaper.
And buy it, because
you
know, if you want to have fun in Arena with the Arena getting harder, what's the easiest way you can do that? Go find an account with a Hegemon, because suddenly the speed meta is meaningless to you. You just go in and you just buff up your Hegemon and either, you know, make them control everything, or just for the funsies, nuke your way up to gold. And I can imagine that could be the most enjoyable sort of first couple of days in Raid, is starting an account with a Hegemon where I know what I'm doing, roll, you know, get some good gear from the Forge, and just like rock up in, you know, Bronze 1 with a Hegemon and be like, brig it. It's
I can imagine that'd be quite fun, actually.
I think the other angle with them driving strength towards niche champions is, I think there was a clear thing with Hydra where they were afraid that the player base would solve it too quickly. So by putting all these extra mechanics and extra things and putting rotations of heads, you know, they kind of said this weird thing. I still don't understand, where it was like, well, we've got 4 head rotation with 2 extra heads because we want you to have different strategies on different rotations. But then if you're at Nightmare, you pretty much get every head at some point. So in my head, I'm like, well, that's not really a strategy because I've got to plan for all 6 of them. And what they've actually done is they've made a mechanic where it's so complicated with so many things you have to account for, with so many different things, that you end up naturally navigating towards the champion that does 3 things in one, like Chris. He's an extender, he's an increased defense, AoE decreased speed, which is actually really valuable for Hydra, that a lot, I think, gets missed. You know, people think because of what Chris does with his passive, with the decreased attack, I actually think his A1 is probably more valuable to slow down the heads and mess up the mischief, because otherwise the mischief will be the first one that eats. And it's kind of like they have created systems that people are afraid to, they were almost afraid they're going to solve instantly. And they're still getting solved pretty quickly because it didn't take long for the cheese strategy to work. And, you know, clearly they had an idea that Shamael was going to be broken because they deliberately fixed something in his passive to make it so that only one Shamael could work. But they didn't test it enough to realize that players are creative enough to just go and cheese it out with deterrence. And I think we had a pretty much interesting debate about whether we thought that was good or not. But I knew they would fix it in some way, and it was the lazy fix because they still haven't really properly fixed Shamael. But what you end up then is it gets back to the situation where, like you were saying, like if you haven't got a Duchess or a Chris doing a one key nightmare, like I've not seen a one key nightmare team without those two, without at least Duchess. And I'm sure some people in the comments to this may say, well, I've tried it with this, this, and this, but until I see a screenshot of a team doing one key nightmare on Hydra without a Duchess or a Chris, I don't think it's possible, because you need too much. And the other champions, like you need a block buff. There's like 3 that can do it. Hex, there's like one champion.
I think I've seen one, and you replace Duchess and Chris with Tahanarak Venus, and I think another, Tahanarak Venus, Valkyrie, and a bunch of other, really, really powerful,
really strong ones. Yeah, like Valk, obviously because of the shield, right? It's you don't need a healer then.
But again, it's I think it's a real sad thing they nerfed deterrence, because deterrence put a lot of what previously were underused non-meta champions that purely had an
Mother Sibel,
Battle Sage, Suzerain.
Some of the new Shadowkins like Abora, Sachi, not a bad shout, AoE decrease accuracy and stuff like that.
And I'd much rather have that, because they've not killed the one key nightmare. But I'd much rather have the fact that to get a one key nightmare, you need to build these sort of previously underused champs, rather than, go get your Duchess, go get your Chris, go get your
and then come back and enjoy your rewards, basically. And we've got this chasm now, effectively, haven't we, where we've got your clan basically hitting nightmare pretty much, every week, getting the top chest, because they'll just RNG fish and probably want to kill themselves by the end of it, because it's such an awful experience of just trying to not get bad RNG. And then you've got like our clan, where we just don't have the players who really want to do it, and I can understand why, and they're just doing like normal and hard until they get Mithrala. And in the middle, there is no one. It's either you get in the full, or you're not. And then when we talk about like arena, that means your clan is going to be even more competitive, because you're getting more stone skin mythicals. We're not getting mythicals for the last 6 weeks, where you guys have probably got, not many. We know we did the math and we realized you're going to get 70 pieces a year. So it's not insane, but that's still going to make a big difference, because that's, like you were saying at the start of the podcast, that's like about 10, what was it? What do we say? It was like one extra roll essentially you're getting in your budget. You can't replace that. That's like a hard cap. If you manage to get really lucky and you get 6 really strong mythical stone skins, you've now got 6 extra rolls in your stat budget that you have to overcome as an enemy, as facing them.
Yeah.
And we could sit here and rant for absolutely hours.
We could.
I think the main thing that, in summary, like, what was good to have you on the podcast is to get that perspective of someone who is an ultra end game player. We often try to balance it in HH gaming, that we need to write guides to the players who are progressing, as well as, late game. We don't want to necessarily constantly talk about the ultra 1%. But I think it's important from an ultra 1% perspective to realize that actually you are a big part of the game as well. And the things that they're doing are having either very little impact or a lot of negative impact in terms of changing the game.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that if it's trying to appeal to the ultra endgame players, it's a much smaller proportion than they think. They don't seem to know how to appeal to them, and that I actually think that the problem is that you're creating too much of gulf between the majority of the players. Like if you go onto Reddit and if you go into our sort of the Discord questions, they're usually players asking around Spider 13 or this team for Faction Wars. It's still quite early game, and then there's the people who still enjoy it at ultra end game, but they're losing that middle, because once people sort of beat most of the game, they realize, oh my god, it's such a slog, or it's such a massive spend, and then it's like, right, I give up, or I'm going to re-roll a new free-to-play account, or I'm going to re-roll a new account, or I'm just going to stop.
It's that reality of when someone goes, I'm late game, and then they actually see a late game play and they go, oh,
I'm barely mid game.
I'm not even close to the end game. So it is.
I mean, I'm definitely not end game. I'm later, or the start of end game.
I complete all of Doom Tower Hard, and I have done all of Faction Wars. And I probably, if I really pushed hard, I could do Hydra Nightmare if I was really like didn't have a life, and I really pushed for it. But I can do hard and brutal if I wanted to. I've got a 1 key nightmare. I would say I'm pretty late game. I did all the secret rooms this rotation in hard, but I would never even think that I could even compete at platinum level. Yeah. I'm nowhere near it. It's like a whole level of an account missing, essentially.
I don't have any sort of any faction guardians maxed out. I don't have any sort of meta +4s. Everyone who knows me knows I talk about my +4 Blood Gorge, but again,
I think was it Parvo who was on the earlier records. We were memeing around in Deadwood's Discord, and we actually convinced him to +4 Skull Lord. And it was funny because he was one-shotting people with his Skull Lord.
Yes.
So we're still trying to figure out a meme team with Skull Lord and Uros as a +4.
I mean, I'd like to see what it did now with the buff. So.
Yeah, but but I've had pick players semi-seriously tell me if I want to sort of compete in platinum, because I don't have any of the meta defense champs. I don't have Hedgie or Duchess or Siphi or Warlord, which is pretty key. I've been semi-seriously told buy an account.
Silly.
Go if you really want to play flat, buy an account. And
for a player at your level, that's says it all.
And not just level, knowledge.
Absolutely.
Your understanding, like whenever we talk about math or something, I'll come to you because you have that base understanding of XYZ equals this, and if you're in that position, you're going, it doesn't matter how much you know, buy an account.
Yeah,
it's a problem. If they want to be serious,
that is not what
PvP,
we're promoting on this podcast, guys.
You shouldn't do it. 100%. It's against
don't do it. You're gonna get banned.
Plarium are not enforcing it. They are not stopping the behavior because it's so easy. Like as you said, you Google it, it's there. Yeah. So if they want a serious year of PvP and competitive aspects, then they 100% have to do something about it. Otherwise, people are not going to engage.
I mean, we can do a whole other podcast. Maybe we have to come back to explain to them why Plarium not stopping this is actually putting them on very legally shaky ground for a massive civil action lawsuit. But maybe we'll end it there.
That sounds like an interesting one. So I think
if people want it, comment below.
Senti's basically just volunteered himself to come back, which is definitely a plus from us, because I think insight from somebody who behind the scenes, we do ask you your opinion on a lot of stuff, and it's nice to be able to give you a voice for that, because you are such a highly respected person within the community. You had your little feature in the awards show, and I
was told to do some CIA FBI investigations to find out what your official job was. So if you had a random question about, you do that for a living, don't you? I was asked, what do you do, and do you have this? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, we rant about raid. It's not like I'm sitting in his bush outside his house. That's just not me.
That'd be creepy.
That would.
But yeah, awesome. So we'll wrap up the podcast there, guys. Obviously, massive thank you to Senti for joining us this week. Hopefully, he will come back again very soon. But until the next episode, if you do enjoy these podcasts, make sure you like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next episode.